And welcome back to Whispers to Wisdom, who talk for soul-led life. And today's episode is just a little bit different. It's raw, it's real, and it's from the heart. As some of you might know, Ozzy Osbourne's passed, and today was his funeral. And for me, and maybe for some of you too, it feels like the end of an era. You know, you didn't have to know him personally to feel this. Some of us grew up with his voice echoing through our bedrooms, his songs blasted through headphones, or rolling from cassette decks on long soul-searching walks. He was more than a musician. He was a memory keeper, a vibe, an energy. And today I want to honour that and talk about this, why this kind of loss hits so deeply, even if we've never met the person. You know, music is magic. It holds energy, memory, and identity. Ozzy's music wasn't just noise, it was the backdrop to our rebellion, our heartbreaks, and our becoming. His voice carried rage, grief, chaos, weirdness, but it also carried freedom, permission to be different, to feel deeply, to not fit in. So when someone like Ozzy leaves this world, it's not just about the person, it's about everything that their presence has represented in our life. So let's talk about that moment when someone says, "Why are you so upset? You didn't even know them." Here's the truth. Grief doesn't always follow logic. It simply doesn't. It follows connection. We grieve because they were woven into the fabric of our becoming, because their art gave us something, even when life didn't. You know, we've all had times in life where we've turned to music, whether it's a sad song, a happy song, or whatever. Whether it's a song that reminded us of our first breakup, our first love, we do turn to music. And because their words, their voice, their face, their sound was a companion in the background of our lives, losing Ozzy is like losing a piece of who we were back then. The teenager, the dreamer, the misfit. And grief, it's sacred. Even when it's for someone that we've never touched, because their energy, Ozzy's energy, touched us. And I want to share how Ozzy shaped my musical taste, my identity, the very foundation of what I now call a soul-led life. You know, when I grew up, my parents, the music I listened to was Gene Pitney, John Denver, Nana Muscuri, the Beatles, rock and roll, Del Shannon, Elvis Presley, all that type of music, which I loved, and I still listen to now and again. But I also listened to, I would go to my nana's when one of my aunties was getting ready, and I loved to go there when she was in her bedroom, and I could only go in her bedroom when I was allowed. And I would go in her bedroom, she would have pictures on her wall. Mark Bolan, David Bowie. And I loved all that. But then it might only last half an hour or so while she was getting ready and I'd be back out. So I used to love going to spend time with me auntie, who was just a teenager at the time, because it gave us that little bit of time where I could just listen to what lit me soul up. So when I started high school, I can't remember much about music before then, apart from what I would hear through listening with my mum and my dad. My mum and dad were always loved music. But when I got to high school, around about 1978, and I started listening to what other people were listening to, because before that it was all who was playing out, who was going on the bikes, all that music wasn't really a shared thing, not amongst friends. But when I got to high school, different, complete world. People would be sitting talking about songs and, Top of the Pops, who would sing on Top of the Pops, everything like that. And I started hearing Black Sabbath, Iron Man, Paranoid. And there was one song that I've always loved. Have a listen to it. Fairies Wear Boots. Used to love that one. And I really got into that. And then obviously I got into, started to realise who Ozzy was as he started his solo career, and loved it. It was my choice to listen to that music. That was what I chose to listen to. Not because my mum would be playing it, not because my dad would be playing it, but it was my choice. My choice to listen to that. And I would, make me way to friends who listened to that type of music because I loved it all. And, you know, Ozzy, he was just unapologetic weirdness, his raw energy, his edge. You know, we could all be ourselves listening to him. You get lost in his music, you get lost in his voice. And even now, years later, I can hear a riff from Crazy Train or Mama, I'm Coming Home, and I'm transported to moments of clarity, to rebellion, to healing. You know, one memory that takes us back is my dad passed in 2005. And I was sat with my dad one day at his home. And by that time, he'd stopped watching TV and things like this, because he said, what was the point of watching any soaps? Because he wouldn't see the end of the storylines. And one day I was sat at the computer, and there was a CD I wanted, Dreamer by Ozzy Osbourne. And I tried to get it everywhere, couldn't get it, but I found it on eBay. So I put a bid on it, and I sat, and it was coming to the end of the bids, and my dad was talking to us, and I said, I'm bidding on this song, on this CD. And he asked us what it was, and and I said who it was and what the song was. And I won the I won the bid, and I got my CD, and I was over the moon. I was chuffed a bit. And I remember my dad was so pleased that I got it, and he said, he says, I'll give you the money for that. And probably going to get a little bit emotional now. But at that moment, it made me remember that my dad had always been a music lover. My dad had always been a music lover. And it reminded us at that moment that we'd shared that passion. And it was it created a connection. My dad loved Tina Turner, he loved Whitney Houston, he loved, many different singers, Cher, Madonna. He loved many different singers. And we connected in that moment. And so when I think of that song, Ozzy Osbourne, Dreamer, and if you haven't listened to it, listen to it. Oh, it's a beautiful song, absolutely beautiful song. If you haven't listened to it, have a listen. It really is such a beautiful song, and through that song, listen to the words. But it wasn't just the words, because I don't think that was actually his song. He didn't write it. But the way that he sounded singing those words, he put the meaning into those words, he put the energy into those words. And through that song, you know, I could say that mystical. It doesn't have to be soft and sweet. It can be wild, electric, messy, loud. And that's something that I bring into my spiritual life and my work with others. At that moment, Ozzy unknowingly reminded me that you can be spiritual and gritty. And at that time, I had to be gritty when my dad was dying. He passed just a few days after that. You don't have to be fit to be free. You can always just be you, and there's many of us play songs, regardless of whether it's Ozzy Osbourne or what, a lot of songs from my youth who the singers are no longer here. Brings up so many memories. There's one, I think everyone knows it. I forget who sang it, but, probably everyone will know All By Myself. Because at one time that was the song that you played when you had a breakup with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and you hear it and you'd cry. So we all have songs. So sometimes when people say, you didn't even know the person, why are you getting upset? It's not, you don't need to know the person, it's the emotions, it's the memories that it stirs up. That's what brings up the grief. The death of a public figure often stirs more than grief. It shakes up our sense of time. When I think about my dad buying us that CD, which I still got, and if I think about the time, sometimes it just feels as though it was just yesterday, but in reality, it was 2005, 20 years ago. And it reminds us how things have changed. 20 years ago, I was a lot younger. My kids were still kids. I'm a grandma now. So it does make me realize, how much have changed and how much we've changed. It can feel like a thread that's been pulled, unraveling old versions of us that we forget is still inside. But maybe that's the sacredness of it all. It's mourning that helps us to reconnect with music, with memory, with ourselves. Ozzy's legacy isn't just the music. It's a space that he made for weirdness. He wasn't really weird, but he just was himself. He was himself. He was down to earth. And he's he's not typical, but he's that story of a small town lad made good. He came from nothing and he ended up living his dreams because he was just him. So Ozzy's legacy, it's not just the music, it's him. It's a space that he made for rebellion, for soul-led individuality. You know, back at that time, I remember there was a big thing at the time, oh, don't listen to Black Sabbath, it's Satanism and it links to the devil and blah, 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 and all this and that. And that's one thing that my parents never said to me. They never judged us for the music that I liked. I like many genres, but rock is my favourite. I love music, but rock is my favourite, and I absolutely loved Ozzy. You know, so if you can take anything from today, from this talk, let it be grieve how you need to. Light a candle, play music loud of the star that you are grieving, that you are mourning. That brings up many memories. Cry if you want to, laugh if you want. You know, talk to the version of you who danced and listened and sat at school listening to Ozzy, sitting there, you know, like this. There's no wrong way to honour someone who shaped your soul through music, through sound. Because just remember, grief is just love with nowhere to go. So let it rise. Let it move, let it whisper wisdom to you in its own way. And if this episode stirred anything in you, you're not alone. You know, keep all of your memories alive, not just of Ozzy, of everyone. Talking about loved ones keeps the spirit alive, keeps the memories alive. You know, think about who you were when Ozzy's voice gave you something to hold on to. You know, there was times in Ozzy's life where he thought everything was down the pan, but he always rose like a phoenix. You know, and there's nothing surer that you can rise to. So if you have special songs of Ozzy's or anyone's that means something to you, pop them in the comments. Let us know what songs resonate with you in your life. What was your favourite memory that links to one song? Do you have a memory of a specific Ozzy song? You know, and I think Mama, I'm Coming Home, I think that hits home for everyone, doesn't it? But I'll be back next week, with more raw, real talk for your soul-led journey. And until then, keep listening to the music, to your heart, to your spirit, to the whispers in your own wisdom. R.I.P. Ozzy. You were never just a singer. You were a mere soul guide in leather and eyeliner who had a few blips along the way, but you had a hell of a ride. So, till I meet you again, Ozzy, or meet you for the first time, keep rocking. See you all soon. Bye for now.